Haroon Siddiqui, the Warangal-born editor emeritus of the Toronto Star, in his career of 6 decades and more, has been witness to many a watershed moment in international politics, like the Iranian Revolution in the late 1970s, the Iraq War, the Iraq-Iran conflict, and the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. In his memoirs, Haroon deals with many complex issues like migration, multiculturalism, citizen identity, outlook of Western media while covering issues mid and far east. Thank you, Mr. Siddiqui, for joining us for this conversation. Your members Unapologetic. It's a very interesting read. If one were to look at it holistically, I mean, we would come to specific issues and topics later. Uh, would I be right, if I were to describe it as a book which looks into the identity of an individual? What am I or who am I in a multicultural milieu?
Yes, that's true. First of all, thank you for having me. Like all great books or very wretched books, this book is many books in one. But that one theme, because I couldn't make up my mind on what to concentrate. But nonetheless, the issue of identity is very important in the modern world because what does the United Nations say? I think the figure is that 300 million people live in countries other than where they were born. So migration is a contemporary issue. It is particularly contemporary to Indians because along with the Chinese, Indians have always migrated since the 19th century to the West Indies, to Fiji Islands, to other places. And in modern times, the Indian diaspora is estimated to be about 40 million or so. So the issue affects us a great deal. Back to what you were saying, when we migrate to the West, has long been an arrogant assumption in the West that they are superior. They are superior to Asians. They are superior to, of course, Indians.
Culturally,
yes.
I mean, you say when you say that they are superior, in what context culturally?
No, the Western civilization has always considered itself superior. So any immigrants who comes here is told to live in Rome as the Romans do, adopt our ways, talk like us, change your names to our names. Muhammad should become more. On and on it goes. So, and a lot of immigrants for over a long period of time have adjusted to that sense of superiority and that dictation to the newer immigrants. You should behave and think the way we do. And the modern immigrant, especially ones who come from India, I felt I am not inferior to these people. I come from a great civilization which is 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years old. I have a heritage, Islamic heritage of 1,500 years. I am not inferior to anyone. No, I will not change my name. You see, the title of my book in Canada was "My Name Is Not Harry," which is a mischievous way of stating that I would not change. I would retain my culture. I am who I am. I have multiple identities from India. We are used to multiculturalism. I am a multicultural person. I am who I am. What I will do is obey the law, of course, pay my taxes, which is a very Canadian thing to do. But beyond that, stop telling me how to behave or what to do.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll come to that issue of conformity to, civilizational conformity that is sought.
Correct. That's a very good phrase. Yes.
Yeah. Later in the interview. Just taking a step back in that particular book, you have dealt with a very complex issue as far as the Indian subcontinent pre and post independence, especially the partition of India, is concerned. And there have been historians who have dealt with it, especially the role of the Islamic clergy, and also the role of the people who were from the community but well-off feudal lords in the entire movement, and with a special reference to what you have told about Maulana Madani and the Deoband Islamic Seminary.
Yeah.
There is also a book by historian Vipul Dhulipala about this entire phenomena just before the independence, mid 30s to
Yes.
1947. It's called The Creating a New Medina, and
Yeah.
it deals in great detail about this. Uh, so there's one interesting aspect that you have picked up in that book. When you mention Maulana Madni's beliefs on diversity amongst the Muslims per se, and then you quote him and say that you have mentioned that Maulana's believes that given the diversity of Muslims, a consensus on the nature of Islamic polity would be difficult to achieve. This was in the context of demand for a separate Muslim state of Pakistan before the
Yeah.
independence. Now, he also goes on to say that only an authoritarian state can define and enforce Islamic conformity. So, does that, in a way, does that imply that Islam as a state religion and democracy are not compatible, or how does one interpret that?
No, 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 exactly the opposite. First of all, just by way
Okay.
of background, because a lot of people may not know this. While there was a demand for Pakistan that gathered momentum in the 1930s and 40s, um, slowly a majority of Muslims, certainly those in northern India, were drawn to that idea because of the assumption that they would lose their identity in a new India, so on and so forth. What is long forgotten, both in India and Pakistan, that a segment of the Muslim population actively opposed the idea of Pakistan. We are familiar with the figure of Maulana Azad, the first education minister of India, Dr. Zakir Hussain, who went on to become president. Beyond that, among those who objected to this idea of Pakistan were very conservative, orthodox Muslims centered in the famous school of Deoband, the Madrasa of Deoband, Darul Uloom Deoband. The rector of that place was Maulana Madani, as Sumit was mentioning. Maulana Madani actively opposed the idea because he said, first of all, we are a product of Hindustan. We live in India. Islam has thrived here. Muslims have thrived here. And he said that we talk about Pakistan, whose Islam would prevail in Pakistan? That was a very observant question. Given the theological, cultural, linguistic diversity of Muslims, whose Islam would prevail in Pakistan? And the next punchline was only an authoritarian government can define what kind of Islam Pakistan would have and then impose it. Further, the next punchline was only in a democracy will Muslims and Hindus and people of all faiths can survive and thrive respecting each other. So now you look at countries like Saudi Arabia or other places. Saudi Arabia defines what other people call Wahabi Islam. Somebody
Yeah.
else runs a different kind of Islam. So this idea that even in Europe, throughout Europe, the battles that were fought in the 19th century, which kind of Christianity would prevail? Protestantism in England, of course.
Yeah.
Roman Catholicism comes along, you have wars. After wars, million people died.
Yeah.
So religion, and in fact, now we have a state of Iran defined by the Shia clergy. We have a state of Israel defined by Judaism. Uh, problems. Maulana Madani's point was that all people, majorities and minorities, are best off in a democracy that treats all citizens equally. That is an extraordinary observation that has been proven right by contemporary history, not only in India, Pakistan, and elsewhere, but also all across the West. That is,
Yeah.
in fact, the principle.
Yeah. You also, deal with to some extent, draw a comparison between the mutiny, which the Indians considered as the first war of independence against the British, and the defense of Delhi, and thereafter the plunder of Delhi, where the mosques were stormed and sacred places were stormed, and so drawing a comparison with what happened in some of the places like Afghanistan and Iraq in the last 20, 30 years, where the American and Allied forces uh, intervened militarily and otherwise.
Yeah.
So the larger context, I suppose, is that missing sensitivity amongst the civilizations that have not dealt with people here.
It's more central than that, Sumit, because what it says is colonialism is a bad thing. You cannot go and by force impose yourself on other people, which is what happened in British colonial India. This is what a modern version, if you will, not exact parallel, but more or less the same. America wanting to impose itself on Afghanistan, trying to impose itself on Iraq, trying to impose itself earlier in Vietnam, all end up in extraordinarily mega failures, as we know. And then a byproduct of that is that there is hardly any local sensitivity to it. I mean, the British tried their very hard to try take the Hindu out of the Hindu, the Muslim out of Muslim, make me less Muslim than I am. The French tried to do the same thing in Algeria. All of those things fail dramatically and spectacularly. Back to your point, in terms of they lack not only the sensitivity to those local customs and practices and lack of respect and the dignity of other people, they cause massive destruction. Why was Afghanistan invaded? Because that was the postal address of Osama bin Laden. But Afghanistan, as bad as the Taliban and other people were, they had nothing to do with 9/11. 9/11 was carried out by 19 Muslim terrorists, many of whom were Saudis, the greatest ally of the United States. 2003, you invaded Iraq, and Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. It's just vindictiveness, sense of impotency, and lashing out, and misuse of power. And I risk repeating myself, all of those things end up spectacularly badly.
There's one other issue that you've raised about, when you talk about militancy, terrorism, and the problem of, madrasas in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. And there have been allegations and accusations that they are the breeding grounds for militancy. And you've said that, some might be, but the larger issue that plagues these institutions is that they're providing substandard education. Now, there have been attempts in India, especially where the governments have tried to modernize the curricula and open the books. But then that always invites also the backlash, also a resistance, and people are also apprehensive that this could be an interference in the education system, and this may spill over to uh, the uh, the personal laws
Mhm.
of Muslims and communities who want to hold on to them. So minority education per se and is a very sensitive issue, but at the same point in time, as you said, that madrasas need to modernize, both in terms of curricula and otherwise.
No, Sumit, you have summarized nicely a lot of things. First of all, there is this broad propagandistic assertion that madrasas are a bad thing, which is, first of all, a very highly
They
questionable
breed
proposition.
militancy. I mean, that's the larger
Yes, that's a larger
leitmotif.
issue. So in fact, this is also a Western concept. It's not an Indian concept. The less religious you are, the more secular you are deemed to be. The more religious you are, the more bigoted you're assumed to be. But that is not true. In India, the most religious people, be they Hindu, be they Muslim, be they Buddhist, be they Jains, always got along with each other. They were not bigoted people. So this idea that if you come from a Hindu school or a Muslim school, you are automatically bigoted is totally pig-headed. That's one. And it's really a Western concept. Number two, most of the militancy and so on that has been ascribed to the madrasas is again propagandistic post 9/11. In the 1990s, the Mujahideens were nurtured by the Americans because they were opposing the Soviet Union. So they were good guys. The same people who came out of so-called madrasas became bad guys when they started opposing the Americans. So we should be very careful about the terminology. of what we say about religious people and the madrasas. Madrasas are not breeding ground of militancy. That's a falsehood. Some may be, sure, but not overwhelming. As Mahatma Gandhi said, truly religious people do do not are not bigoted against people of other religion. If they understand their own religion well, they are very respectful of people of other faiths. Now back to your question. Um, so madrasas, now we come to the question of madrasas in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, whatever. They feel besieged by all this propaganda and by all these assertions of wanting to make them modern. Some of them are already modernizing. But when the government diktat comes and say you must do this exclusively, Muslim madrasa, they resist. Why do they resist? They resist because of 3 or 4 reasons. One, because they think they'll be taken over by the government. They don't trust governments because governments have not been very fair to them in the long run. The mainstream media, the mainstream political discourse has not been fair to them. So they react, oh no, you can't come here. That's one. As a Muslim, then I say, a lot of madrasas are bad madrasas because they're not teaching very either Islam properly or let alone modern curricula and so on. So, and some of them become cash cows. So, no, they don't want to open their books to some government type coming. So there's a larger issue of you need to build credibility. Why are you asserting this? So are you asserting this because you really want this school to teach modern education, improve themselves, of course, have higher standards? Who can argue with that? But if you are coming after them because they're a minority, they're going to say, oh, hold off. No, we are not going to allow you to do that. So there's many issues involved and integrated into it. In the abstract, no question, curricula need to be improved. In the abstract, no question, financial books should be opened. In the same way that books should be opened on Hindu temples and trusts and gurudwaras and so on and so forth. But if you come after Muslims alone, they will resist, no question. They
Yeah.
should not, but they do. That's the sort
In
of
your
reality.
members, you especially mentioned two of your teachers, one your journalism professor, S.A. Govindarajan, and in reference to the post-independence Indian multicultural cosmos.
Yes.
Uh, and then you say that, I mean, and you make a comparison between your father, who's a devout Muslim, and your teacher,
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
yeah, Hindu. And though they came from very disparate social and cultural background, but they were more secular than many secularists today, you say. So, why do
Exactly.
you think that in post-independence India, it could still retain that sensitivity and acceptance of the other, quote unquote, just after a very bloody partition?
Yeah, you see, the great thing is I have very fond memories of India and my childhood because most Indians, despite the horrors of 1947, had put that aside. And this Nehruvian idea of a secular India had taken hold. Um, and it was not just Nehru's idea, it's the whole Indian idea of multiculturalism, that we all live together with each other on the same street. There are Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Jains, and so on and so forth, speaking different languages but respecting each other. Now, you spoke about my father. My father was an Orthodox Muslim with a beard. Um, the two teachers who came to our house to teach us, one was Pandit Chakrapani, who taught us Telugu, and then C. Ramchandra Rao sir, who taught me English, Ren and Martin English grammar. When they came to our house, both were strict vegetarians. So my mother not only, of course, respected their vegetarianism, she assured them that not only are there cups and saucers and so on, but the utensils in which their tea or coffee was made has been set aside separately in the kitchen. I mean, can you believe that? That kind of respect for each other was extraordinary. Further story. Um, I was a bad student. I was playing cricket most of the time. So I failed at pre-med. I failed at pre-med engineering. I meandered my way through a Bachelor of Science degree. I took admission in literature. Then I meandered into journalism. And I went and told my father sheepishly, Baba, I'm thinking I'm going to try journalism. His first reaction was, what the hell are you doing? Make up your goddamn mind. That's not what he said. What he said was, have you asked TGV? Who is TGV? T.G. Vaidyanathan was my English teacher, a Brahmin who had come from what was then Madras to Warangal. So I said, I have asked TGV, and TGV said it should work out all right, and he told me to come and talk to you. My father said, if it's all right with TGV, it's all right with me. Now, it doesn't seem like a throwaway line at that point. In old age, I realized it's an extraordinary sentence. Here is a man who is a Orthodox Muslim. Here is TGV, pure old Brahmin from Madras. Both are very high in the pantheon of Indian civilization. Parent, teacher, both respect each other. Those two people could not have been more disparate and different than each other, but they valued each other's judgment and respected each other's judgment. So my father said, if it's all right with TGV, it's all right by me. Those two people, in their own way, were more secular, more small and liberal than many of the so-called secularists today, either in India or in the Western world. That is a profound thing. So back to my quotation from Mahatma Gandhi. If you really understand your own religion, you will not hate people of other religion.
Mr. Siddiqui, your reference about your teacher, T.G. Vaidyanathan, you made there's a very interesting observation. And you've quoted Ashish Nandi's obit of here, Mr. Vaidyanathan, where where he referred to his style of scholarship, which he's called it a Brahminical pride in one's simplicity and cultivated poverty.
Yes,
Yeah. So, if I were to make a comparison with today's journalists and editors, vis-a-vis, those who worked in this medium 2 or 3 decades back, who were faceless people, but now journalists are stars. They appear on television, they have their
correct.
presence on digital media.
Makeup लगाते हैं.
Yeah, everywhere. I mean, they are the influencers who can intervene
Yes,
to even disrupt news cycles through
correct.
online tools and whatever. So, do you think that this change in the profile of a journalist who was a nameless, faceless chronicler of the contemporary events, uh, from there to what it is he or she is now, this has also made them, active participants in news cycles and not disinterested chroniclers as they were, and it has impacted also the entire profession of journalism per se.
Yeah, you see two things. First of all, you and I sound like old people. So because the entire society has changed, ways of
Yeah.
doing things have changed. We are all driven by personalities, influencers, Ms. Kardashian and so on, who has nothing to contribute mentally or intellectually, but we all follow her. So these are the stupidities of modern age. So forget that. You have made a very important secondary point, which is the following. From being a neutral observer of the scene and faithfully communicating to the audiences the facts as you saw them, has now evolved into made journalists into active participants, as though they themselves are influencers and they have opinion. This is the Fox News model pioneered by Mr. Murdoch in England and the United States. So there's a Foxization of most of journalism. That in turn in fact, was a precursor of the social media. What do I mean by that? There's such a proliferation of social media now. Everyone lives in their own silos. I want to talk to only those people who agree with me, who think like me, who share my prejudices, who share my hatreds of other people. So you're all in silos. If you're in silos like that, what happens to the fundamental tenet of democracy, that there has to be a common space for people to exchange ideas, where people come together, where compromises are made. अच्छा आप ये कहते हैं, हम ये बोलते हैं, can we agree on this middle ground, whatever. The common space has eroded, has been eroded by social media. And the journalists themselves have become representing one of those silos, मैं conservative हूँ, मैं फला का हूँ, I follow this. And then inevitably, when you take that position, you start getting on your soapbox. You start making fiery speeches and so on. And partisanship takes you over completely. You're no longer a journalist. You're just one of those people who shouts in favor of this and that. There's a great erosion of democracy. But why do they do it? Because they're not bad people. Their producers are telling them to do it. Why? They're posing, because that's what drives the numbers and the data. That is also a product of social media. What generates the most traffic on social media? There's a great British singer who has had a lyric that's saying, I'll become naked and I'll be famous. Okay, that's one model. Second model is the more emotional, the more, what am I looking for? More extremist you are, the more people you attract. Hatred, murder, mayhem attract more audiences than reasoned dialogue. So social media and all these guys who preen on radio and television, especially on television, there's an erosion. There's a great erosion of journalistic skill. So rare are those people like my old professor TGV, who simply observed, who were keen observers and brought their insight to what they were seeing and made us see things more clearly. They were not shouting at us. That's the point.
When it come to the reportage, especially about the Iranian Revolution you covered and the Middle East reportage, it's a very interesting observation that you made, especially about the Iranian Revolution when you traveled outside of Tehran. And you sense that people were willing to speak to you and uh, come out with their stories because they were speaking to somebody, if I quote you, that because you weren't violating their dignity when you were having a conversation with them. This is basically a question regarding, how the Western media and probably if there is a lacune in the way they have covered international events over the years, especially in Asia and elsewhere, where probably reporters do not grasp the sensitivity of the subjects and the people that they are reporting on. The word unto itself, the fixer, which is used so commonly in by the Western journalists, fixers taking them around, getting them the stories, getting them in touch with the
Yes.
people. Yeah. Do you think the real story gets lost probably in the translation and
No,
also in the
no, I
prejudices
think
that they carry?
in the context of West reporting and the East, that's a different issue. What it is that the real story gets lost in arrogance, Western assumption of arrogance and superiority and so on, and the misdeeds of their masters, be they British, be they American, and so on. So you spoke of the Iranian Revolution. When I went there from Canada to cover it, there was mass hysteria over the hostage crisis, I suppose, as perhaps there should have been. There were, I forget the exact number, 350, 400 American journalists broadcasting hysteria every day. But the real story, and just to back up, I was also covering that thing, and the cameras would be turned on in front of the American embassy, and the Iranians would perform to the cameras. They shout, Margbar Shah, Margbar Imrika. Margbar means death to the
Death
Shah,
too.
death to America. Okay. Then once that is done, the lights are turned off. These guys are mingling with American reporters, offering them pistachios, giving them cigarettes. Yeah, what is this? There is some disconnect here. What is going on? What is going on is they're putting on a show. And Dilip Hero, who was a journalist from India who used to live in London, lives in London, and he was there, and he and I had gone out for dinner. Dilip said, this is all BS. So I said, what do you mean this is BS? Yeah, stories is not here. यार बाहर जाओ, बाहर जाओ. बाहर कहाँ जाओ? Go out into the city. That's where the story is. So I telexed my boss in Toronto. I said, a friend of mine says I should leave this tamasha here and go elsewhere. And much to their credit, is, ठीक है, चले जाओ. Go wherever you want to go. And you got into the street, you hear stories. You hear hundreds of stories of why people brought about the revolution, why they were opposed to the Shah, why there was so much torture by Savak, secret police of the Shah, what sins Americans had committed. You got real stories. That's what I mean. This second part of your question was, they spoke to me more freely because A, I was not American, I was not British, I was not white, my name is Muslim. On top of that, I'm from India. So the click, कि भाई ये आदमी को we can trust him, they खुल के बात करते हैं, they speak freely. And good stories came out, good human stories came out of that, which I did not realize at that time. When I came back after 3 months or 4 months to Canada and Toronto, people spoke about those simple stories. You know that story you wrote about the revolution bringing water to the village? That was terrific. Can you the human connection, you see? People in Toronto are relating to that story as opposed to this tamasha in front of the American embassy. So these are, what am I saying? I'm saying you need to respect people, accept their dignity. They should accept you, that you would be fair to them. That's what leads to sort of a good stories, opening up of minds, opening of hearts, and sharing of sentiments, sharing of true sentiment. I'll give you an Indian example. 1975 tha kya tha? 75 when the emergency was on Mrs.
Yeah.
Gandhi's. There was an election. I had gone to cover that election. And the polls had not said that she would lose the election that badly, Jayaprakash Narayanji was leading the opposition movement, highly respected figure, Kriplani, highly respected figure, and so on. Still, it was not clear that they would win. So I went out into the streets to talk to people. Purana Delhi, यहाँ वहाँ इधर लोगों से बात करो, so they were beginning to say that, and even Mrs. Gandhi's own constituency, you could hear the people fed up of the government, and they were beginning to find the courage to say that. So I took a risk and wrote a column that the government seems headed for defeat, or words to that effect. And sure enough, the government lost. So the people speak up, we have to listen to them, the ordinary people. There's a great power in the power of the vote in a democracy.
Coming back to the point that we discussed right at the beginning about citizenship and identity in a multicultural milieu, it's a very interesting point that you made, and you quoted Trudeau Senior of the national unity, who was father of the prime minister who was earlier there, where he said that national unity in a country can be founded in individual identity.
Yes.
Yeah. So, in the current thrust on monoculturalism, do you think multiculturalism is, an individual identity in a national unity seems a utopian idea, because human history is a history of migration. Human history is also a history of man's predilection to appropriate power and resources to seek uniformity, safety in uniformity. So, how does the modern world, order reconcile to the concept of being a global citizen, multiculturalism, and then at the same point in time, the growing predilection amongst people who are seeking safety in silos.
No, you see, in the context of the Western world, there has been a backlash against immigration now. 1960s, after 1960s, there was this evolution. All people are equal. We should respect women. Women should have rights. We should respect non-white people, on and on. And there has been a revolution of expectation. Canada became officially a multicultural nation. But there has been a backlash, fanned by people like Donald Trump and so on. This is all wokeism. What does that mean? It means I have lost my white superiority. I want to be back in the saddle. And what is the biggest fault line across the Western world, not just in Trump's America, but in Europe, Holland, France, and so on? It is the color line. Keep the brown Latin Americans out of America. Build the wall. Madame Le Pen in France, same thing. Geert Wilders in Holland, same thing. In India, parts of Pakistan, same thing. Bangladesh, same thing. What does that tell us? It tells us that at this point, we have lost this notion that in a democracy or in any society, we need to respect each other. We need to not violate the dignity of other people, both minorities and majorities, because we share a space. We have to live with each other. How long are we going to go like this, suppress people, you know? It will not work. I mean, with Donald Trump, we all talk about Donald Trump, Donald Trump. My bigger question is this: why did half of America vote for him twice? Because people are breaking down and they're reacting strongly. But there's a great Farsi saying, "This too shall pass." हो जाएगा. You know, we go through these evolutions. I'm an optimist, so we say that people will come back to their senses, kind of thing. How long will they do it? History teaches us that. So this too shall pass.
This too shall pass. One last question. You have quoted the very famous Bob Dylan and his number. So,
Good old
if
Bob
I were
Dylan,
to
yes.
ask you how long must a man live in Canada to become a Canadian? So, what would your answer be?
Yes, the answer is blowing in the wind, he said. Which is the way of saying, कि भाई, accept people as they are. You know, ये Canada में ये आदमी कब आया है, और he has, how long has he to live? 50 years, 60 years when you treat him as a Canadian. So there's a central grain of truth to the same thing that we are saying. And we are saying, I'm saying more prosaically. He said it more poetically, being a great poet.
Yes.
We all need poetry, yeah.
Yeah. It was a pleasure speaking to you, Mr. Siddiqui.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks much for joining us for this conversation.
Thank you for having me.